happy anniversary and goodbye. And I hope it's not prophetic because it happens on our anniversary, Gary's and mine.
Something about Lucille Ball's life never quite matched the woman the world thought it knew. The laughter, fame, and flawless timing hid the heartbreaking private battles that shaped her entire life. Childhood scars, a turbulent marriage, and one terrible habit she refused to let go of, left a mark that wouldn't surface until decades later. And when her life finally ended, the tragic truth revealed by doctors exposed a chain of events far more unsettling than anyone expected. A life marked by struggles. Lucille Ball is remembered as a cultural landmark, an actress who reshaped comedy, redefined television, and built an empire that still influences the industry. Yet, behind that iconic status was a childhood marked by financial insecurity, emotional instability, and a pattern of hardship that followed her into adulthood. Fame eventually elevated her to a place few performers ever reach, but those early years left traces she never fully outran. For Lucille Ball, success was always intertwined with struggle, and the weight of both shaped the woman the world would come to admire. She was born Lucille Desiree Ball on August 6, 1911, in Jamestown, New York, and her early memories were shaped by frequent moves, long stretches of uncertainty, and a profound loss that arrived far too early. When Lucy was just 3 years old, her father died of typhoid fever, a sudden tragedy that destabilized the small family at its core. Her mother, still in her 20s, was left widowed and financially vulnerable, forced to work wherever jobs appeared. This brought about years of separation and instability for Lucy, who was often placed in the care of relatives. She was shuttled between different homes, staying with grandparents, aunts, and other extended family members who were juggling their own limitations. Money was scarce, and the family lived on the edge of poverty, making do with whatever circumstances allowed. Lucy later described this period as a childhood without a true center, where she rarely felt fully rooted. Despite that unstable foundation, Lucy developed an early fascination with performance. She had a natural instinct for storytelling, mimicry, and character creation, but no one around her knew how to channel it, and there were no resources to nurture artistic ambitions. Her mother's remarriage brought some structure, but the financial struggles continued, and Lucy entered adolescence already accustomed to uncertainty. At 15 years old, she left high school and moved to New York City to enroll in the New York Drama School, where she studied alongside future stars like Bette Davis. Yet, instead of encouragement, Lucy encountered a wall of doubt. Instructors reportedly found her stiff, unfocused, and lacking the promise they expected from young actors. Some even bluntly told her she had no real talent. But while this harsh dismissal could have ended her pursuit entirely, it instead revealed her defining trait: perseverance. Lucy was determined to stay in the world she felt drawn to, despite not being considered star material. She supported herself the only way she could, by working. Lucy began modeling for Hattie Carnegie, which gave her just enough visibility to book small advertising jobs. Modeling offered structure, but it wasn't the place where she envisioned her future. She wanted to act, and every job she took in New York served as a stepping stone toward Hollywood, even when the path seemed unfocused and uncertain. By 1933, she finally made her way west and joined the chorus line of the Goldwyn Girls, a troupe of young women featured in musical films. It was a common entry point for aspiring actresses, though rarely a glamorous one. The Goldwyn Girls were decorative rather than celebrated, but the position placed Lucy on actual film sets, giving her access to directors, producers, and actors who were embedded in the industry she hoped to join. But Hollywood at the time had a clear hierarchy, and Lucy was not placed near the top of it. Most of her early work came in low-budget projects, and as the 1930s turned into the 40s, she gained a new reputation as the dependable lead of countless modestly funded productions. This earned her the informal title of the Queen of the B's, a reference to her frequent roles in B-movies that studios produced quickly and inexpensively. It wasn't an insult, but it wasn't a compliment either. It positioned her as a fixture of Hollywood, but not as one of its most promising actresses. And yet, underneath the unremarkable roles, Lucy developed precision, timing, control, physicality, and an instinctive sense of how an audience reacts. All of it went largely unnoticed until her voice,
Big romance is going on between you and Mr. Ritter, and I never knew about it.
literally changed the course of her life. In 1948, she was cast in the CBS radio comedy My Favorite Husband, a show that allowed her to use her developing comedic instincts with a freedom she had never experienced in film. The success of the radio program gave her the chance to adapt the show into a new television series, and that series would become I Love Lucy, a sitcom that rewrote the rules of television production, popularized the multi-camera format, and became the most watched program in America. By 1956, it had won an Emmy and cemented Lucille Ball as one of the most influential performers of the 20th century. But despite this success, her struggles did not end. They followed her into adulthood, into her personal life, and into a marriage that would become as legendary and as turbulent as her career. A turbulent marriage to Desi Arnaz. Lucille Ball's rise in Hollywood brought her into the orbit of many actors, directors, and entertainers. But one meeting changed the entire course of her life. In 1940, while filming the movie Too Many Girls, she met a young Cuban bandleader named Desi Arnaz. He was charismatic, confident, and full of energy, a sharp contrast to Lucy's more grounded, steady personality. Their connection was immediate. Even those on set noticed how quickly they gravitated toward each other. Within months, the two were inseparable, and on November 30th, 1940, they tied the knot. From the beginning, their relationship was a mix of deep affection and constant challenges. They loved each other intensely, but they also lived with pressures that few young couples could handle. Desi was already traveling often with his musical group, the Desi Arnaz Orchestra, and his lifestyle on the road brought problems Lucy had never wanted to face. His heavy drinking and repeated infidelity entered the marriage almost immediately, creating a painful cycle of arguments, apologies, and temporary peace. Lucy admired Desi's talent, but she struggled with the instability he brought into their home. By 1944, the situation reached a breaking point. Hurt by his behavior and tired of feeling abandoned, Lucy filed for divorce. The legal complaint made clear what she had been enduring. Desi's drinking and cheating had become too much for her to bear. The filing was a hard, public acknowledgement that their marriage was falling apart. Yet, despite everything, they reconciled. The divorce decree was dismissed when they decided to give their relationship another chance. Their marriage survived for the moment, but the core issues never truly went away. What did change, however, was their work. When Lucy landed the radio show, My Favorite Husband, the success sparked discussions about bringing the idea to television. Lucy insisted that Desi play her husband on the new show. A bold choice given that networks doubted American audiences would accept a mixed ethnicity couple as leads. But Lucy and Desi believed their real chemistry could win over viewers, just as it had won them over years earlier. To prove it, they took their act on a vaudeville tour, performing together across the country. The reaction was immediate. Audiences loved them as a team, and the live response was strong enough to convince CBS to take the risk. Working together brought out the best in both of them professionally. Desi was a sharp businessman who understood production, timing, and the technical side of television. Lucy had a natural gift for physical comedy, emotional expression, and audience connection. Together, they built a studio system that others would later copy. Still, their growing empire did not erase the problems at home. During the 1950s, Desi became increasingly dependent on alcohol. His drinking was no longer something he could hide, and it began to affect both their marriage and their business. He also struggled with gambling, often staying out late, missing important commitments, or showing up exhausted from long nights that had nothing to do with work. Lucy tried for years to keep their marriage from falling apart, but the imbalance grew harder to ignore. Meanwhile, the public image of their home life did not match the reality. Viewers saw a perfect television couple, warm, loving, and inseparable, but behind the scenes, the distance between them widened. By the time I Love Lucy reached its peak, their personal lives were already strained. It became increasingly clear that the problems that once seemed like early marriage missteps were actually long-term patterns Desi could not break. Their children, Lucy Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr., would later feel the impact of these pressures as well. In the 70s, their son Desi Jr. faced well-publicized struggles with substance abuse, and the media attention brought renewed scrutiny to the Ball Arnaz family. While this came long after the divorce, it showed how deeply their turbulent marriage had shaped their children's lives. After 2 decades together, the marriage finally broke under the weight of everything they had tried to hold together. Their divorce was finalized on May 4th, 1960. The reasons were not a mystery. Daisy's alcoholism, gambling, and ongoing affairs had worn Lucy down. She was tired of feeling alone in a marriage that looked strong from the outside, but was crumbling inside. She had spent years hoping things would change, but the emotional distance was now impossible to ignore. Despite ending their marriage, Lucy and Desi never let bitterness define their relationship. They continued working together briefly, and over time, their connection shifted into something more peaceful. Desi often spoke about Lucy with admiration, emphasizing her strength and talent whenever he had the chance. Until his death in 1986, he praised her publicly and privately, holding on to the belief that their personal and professional partnership had shaped the best years of his life. After the end of her marriage to Desi Arnaz, Lucille Ball entered a different kind of partnership marked by stability when she met Gary Morton, a comedian who worked the Borscht Belt circuit, performing in well-known resort venues across the Northeast. His approach to comedy was simple and personable, shaped by years of performing for live audiences who expected quick humor and easy charm. Before entering show business, he served in a World War II entertainment troupe, giving him experience in front of crowds and helping him develop a grounded, adaptable style. He wasn't a major star, but he was respected for being consistent and reliable, qualities that mattered far more to Lucy at this point in her life than fame or flash. Their paths crossed in 1960 during a blind date arranged at the Copacabana nightclub in New York City. Lucy, newly divorced and unsure of what her personal future would look like, was immediately struck by how different Gary felt from anyone she had been with before. He was calm, attentive, and comfortable without needing attention. Their connection grew quietly, without the chaos or public intensity that had defined her relationship with Desi. Within a year, it was clear that this new relationship offered emotional steadiness, something she had rarely known. Lucy and Gary married on November 19, 1961. At the time, Lucy was 13 years older, but the difference never formed a barrier. If anything, it made their relationship easier. Lucy had spent her entire life working, managing productions, and fighting for her place in the industry. Gary had no desire to compete with that. Instead, he fit into her world with ease, supporting her without overshadowing her. Gary soon became part of her professional life as well. Gary joined her team, serving as a producer and executive who helped manage the business side of these later productions. His presence offered structure and calm, allowing Lucy to focus on performing. He was not the creative counterpart Daisy had been, but he provided dependability, which was just as valuable to Lucy during these years. Their marriage developed into a bond defined by mutual respect. Lucy often described Gary as steady and trustworthy, someone who brought balance to her life. Personal letters revealed a relationship with real tenderness, full of small details about daily routines, shared jokes, and an ease she had rarely experienced. Their home life lacked the volatility of her first marriage, and that steadiness allowed Lucy to move through her later career years with a sense of grounding. Lucy and Gary remained married until her death, forming a partnership that lasted nearly 3 decades. By then, Lucy had built one of the most influential television legacies in history, and Gary had become a quiet but essential part of her later success. But while her love life had finally found calm, her career and finances were in a more complex chapter: her empire and finances. By the early 1950s, Lucille Ball had become one of television's most recognizable faces. But behind the scenes, she was building something far more ambitious than a hit show. Alongside Desi Arnaz, she founded Desilu Productions in 1950, a company that began as a small operation designed to manage I Love Lucy, and eventually grew into one of the most influential studios in television history. At a time when actors had little control over their work, Lucy and Desi were determined to shape their careers on their own terms. During the early Desilu years, the company relied almost entirely on the success of I Love Lucy. Money was tight, the workload was heavy, and both Lucy and Desi pushed themselves to keep the studio alive. Even though I Love Lucy became a phenomenon, Desilu's expansion placed enormous financial pressure on them. They had to fund new shows, develop new ideas, and maintain a growing staff. Many of their boldest decisions were made with real financial risk. More than once, Lucy and Desi invested their own savings to keep promising projects moving forward. When Lucy and Desi divorced in 1960, they had not only ended a marriage, but also divided a business that had become their shared identity. In 1962, Lucy bought out Desi's shares and became the sole owner of Desilu Productions. making her the first woman in Hollywood to run a major studio. It was a historic moment, something few people at the time even realized. But for Lucy, it wasn't about breaking records, it was about keeping a company alive that she believed in. Leading Desilu pushed her into a new role. She became an executive. She oversaw dozens of shows, reading scripts, approving budgets, and helping shape the direction of the studio's future. Even with her years of experience in entertainment, this world of production and management brought constant challenges. Desilu had grown rapidly, and some projects drained money before they ever made it to air. Lucy found herself juggling heavy financial decisions while trying to maintain her acting career. Two of Desilu's major successes were bold risks that almost didn't happen. The first was Star Trek in 1966, a science fiction idea that many executives doubted would appeal to mainstream audiences. The second was Mission: Impossible, which also launched in 1966. Both shows were expensive, with complicated sets, large casts, and unconventional storylines. Many viewed them as long shots. But Lucy believed in innovation, and she approved the pilots even though Desilu was under financial strain. Thankfully, those risks paid off. Star Trek and Mission: Impossible became two of the most influential shows in American television. They gave Desilu the success it urgently needed. However, the victories came late. By the mid-1960s, the studio's financial pressures had taken a toll. Running such a large operation while starring in her own work had stretched Lucy too thin. The costs of developing new shows, combined with the shifting television landscape, made it harder for Desilu to compete with major media companies. In 1967, Lucy made the difficult decision to sell Desilu to Gulf Plus Western, which later folded the studio into what became Paramount Television. The sale ended her role as a studio head, but it secured the future of Desilu's major productions and protected her personal finances. Many criticized the decision at the time, but looking back, it was a pragmatic step that allowed Lucy to return her focus to acting and avoid deeper financial risks. Even after selling the studio, Lucy's legacy as an executive remained significant. She had pioneered a production model that later became standard, especially the syndication of reruns, an innovation that changed how television made money. She broke ground for women in positions of authority, demonstrating that an actress could also be a capable and decisive business leader. Yet even as Lucy became one of the most powerful figures in entertainment, she faced a storm that threatened everything she had built. It came from a chapter of her past that the public didn't understand, and the press didn't handle gently. Communist Party allegations. In the early 1950s, when Cold War tensions pushed the United States into a climate of fear and suspicion, Lucille Ball faced one of the most unexpected crises of her career. Long before she became a household name, she had made a choice that seemed harmless at the time, but later placed her directly in the crosshairs of a national investigation. Back in 1936, Lucy registered to vote as a member of the Communist Party. It wasn't a political decision, it wasn't even her idea. She did it to please her grandfather, Fred Hunt, a strong-voiced socialist who held deep political beliefs. He admired left-leaning ideas and wanted his family to reflect his values. Lucy respected him and believed that registering under the Communist Party line was simply a symbolic gesture to keep peace in the household. She attended no meetings, paid no dues, and took no active role. In her mind, the act meant nothing beyond family loyalty. But years later, when the US was consumed by fear of communist influence, that single registration card gained a very different meaning. During that period, the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover monitored people in entertainment with unusual intensity. Files later released show Lucy was watched, questioned, and investigated. The government reportedly wanted to know whether her registration indicated a deeper political commitment or hidden involvement. The scrutiny was serious enough that the FBI collected interviews, gathered reports, and kept her name in active files during the height of the Red Scare. Everything came to a head in 1953, when Lucy was summoned to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. The interrogation focused on her 1936 registration and her grandfather's influence. Lucy explained that she had never been part of the Communist Party, had never attended meetings, and had never supported the ideology. Her testimony was direct and consistent. She had registered only to honor her grandfather, and the decision had no political meaning for her personally. While the committee accepted her explanation, the public still needed reassurance. At the time, any connection, no matter how small, to communism could destroy a career overnight. Studios, sponsors, and networks feared backlash. Just a hint of involvement had ruined many entertainers. Lucy knew her future depended on the public believing her. Here, Daisy Arnaz stepped in with one of the most memorable defenses in television history. Addressing the press, he said, "The only thing read about Lucy is her hair, and even that is not legitimate." His comment reframed the entire situation with humor, giving people permission to relax and dismiss the controversy. In the end, Lucy was formally cleared by the committee, and her career continued without interruption. But the experience left a lasting mark. She had watched others lose their livelihoods during the Red Scare, and she knew how close she had come to a similar fate. Although she survived the political storm, the stress of her personal and professional life was catching up to her. And behind the scenes, she was starting to develop habits that would later affect her health and reshape the final decades of her life. Addiction and health issues. By the time Lucille Ball reached the later decades of her life, the pressures of her career, her responsibilities, and her long public presence had taken a noticeable toll. Even though she remained admired for her energy and humor, she carried habits and health problems that shaped her final years far more quietly than the world realized. One of the most consistent patterns throughout Lucy's adult life was her harmful relationship with smoking. From a young age, Lucy had been indulging heavily in the habit and had kept it going for decades. She reportedly did it everywhere, on set, backstage, during rehearsals, and in private moments. There are photos, home recordings, and eyewitness accounts that show how deeply the habit was woven into her daily routine. But at a time, smoking was common in Hollywood, and Lucy's dependence didn't stand out. However, it challenged the contrast between her real life and her public image. On television, she played warm, high-spirited characters who represented family, joy, and reliability. Off-screen, she moved through her days with harmful habits, a detail that didn't fit the wholesome identity America associated with her. As the dangers of smoking became more widely known, the habit drew more criticism. But Lucy never pretended it wasn't part of her life, and the long-term effects would eventually show up in her medical history. As she grew older, Lucy developed a serious medical condition known as cystic medial necrosis, a weakening of the aortic wall. This disease compromises the structure of the body's largest artery and increases the risk of life-threatening complications. It was a condition that didn't cause daily symptoms, but quietly shaped the risks surrounding her health. While her medical struggles grew more serious, her personal life became quieter. In her final years, Lucy spent increasing amounts of time alone. She reportedly withdrew more often, limiting her social circle and stepping back from the constant activity that had defined most of her career. Some of this isolation came from age and health limitations. Some came from the natural fading of old professional networks, and some came from the emotional fatigue of a life spent under constant public scrutiny. Yet even as she retreated from the everyday spotlight, Lucy never fully disappeared. She remained committed to her craft in the ways she could manage. She participated in interviews, talk shows, retrospectives, and public appearances, offering reflections on her work and sharing memories that fans cherished. She still carried herself with the same sharpness and humor that had defined her for decades, even when her voice softened or her energy dipped. These final years were a mix of strength, fragility, and reflection. Lucy had endured emotional pressure, an intense career, and health struggles that steadily increased. Yet, she never allowed herself to become a passive spectator in her own life. But no amount of resilience could protect her from the condition weakening her heart. In 1989, it reached a point from which she could not recover. Tragic autopsy findings. In the spring of 1989, Lucille Ball entered one of the most serious medical battles of her life. On April 18th, she was admitted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles after experiencing severe chest pains. Doctors quickly discovered she had a dissecting aortic aneurysm, a dangerous tear in the wall of the aorta. It was the kind of emergency that required immediate intervention, and Lucy was rushed into surgery. The operation was long and complex. Surgeons repaired the damaged section of her aorta and stabilized her condition, and for a short time it appeared she might recover. Friends, family, and fans waited for updates, hoping Lucy's strength would carry her through this crisis as well. But her body had been under strain for years. The underlying weakness in her aortic wall, combined with decades of bad lifestyle habits and stress, made recovery far more difficult than anyone wanted to admit. Her circulatory system, already compromised, struggled to handle the demands of healing after such an invasive procedure. 8 days after the surgery, on April 26, 1989, Lucy's condition suddenly worsened, and despite emergency efforts, there was nothing doctors could do. Lucille Ball died at 77 years old, bringing an end to a life that had reshaped entertainment in ways few performers ever achieve. The autopsy that followed revealed the full picture. Lucy suffered from cystic medial necrosis, the rare condition that had been quietly weakening her aorta for years. It made the vessel walls fragile and more likely to tear under pressure. Smoking had accelerated the damage. Stress, sustained over a lifetime of work, responsibility, and public exposure, had also contributed. The autopsy confirmed what her doctors already feared. Even without the recent surgery, her aorta was dangerously compromised. She had been living with a silent risk that eventually became impossible for her body to withstand. After her death, she was laid to rest at Lakeview Cemetery in Jamestown, New York, returning to the place where her life began. And her burial site has become a place of pilgrimage for fans who want to honor the woman who shaped the future of television and comedy. Lucy's death showed how the demands of fame can shape a person far beyond what audiences ever see. Her career brought joy to millions, but the relentless pace, the pressure to perform, and the weight of her responsibilities had left real marks. She had built an empire, sustained a public identity for decades, and carried the emotional load of successes, failures, and private struggles. What do you think about Lucy Ball's tragic passing? Drop your answers in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.